I'm Larissa Thera, and this is Manifest Divinity, broadcasting to you from Mystic, Connecticut. Today I want to talk about spiritual awakening. I thought it would be really fitting for the first episode to be about spiritual awakening, since that's oftentimes really the launching point, or the point where we become aware of ourselves as a spiritual being on a spiritual journey, and a spirit embodied as a human being in this lifetime. So without further ado, I wanted to just kind of bring up some of the distinctions between what can be known as a spiritual awakening and what is like a kundalini awakening. And they have some similarities, but they also have some differences. And my intention here is not to create a distinction or division in that sense, but just to kind of help people understand where they're at and what they've been experiencing, and maybe even what they could do to expand their experience or to have better understanding of things that are happening to them as they happen. Because some of us kind of went through this in the dark. And that's not a bad thing, but it can be a little bit rough, and it can feel a little bit isolating when you're going through this and you don't know anybody else who is. And we do have a tendency to find each other, and that's kind of also what I'm hoping that this podcast will do, is bring us together. But I definitely wanted to just go over some of this so that folks have a better understanding of themselves and their experience. So there's a major distinction between spiritual awakening and kundalini awakening. Spiritual awakening usually arises from a major shift in understanding. Usually like a mental shift, but oftentimes there is a lot of physical or circumstances, life circumstances that change, that sort of launch a person into that shift in their understanding. And this is what a lot of people are experiencing right now and over the last few years. I've definitely had a lot of like mini awakenings over the course of my lifetime. And now as an adult who's had a kundalini awakening, I can understand these different phases in my life where I experienced a little bit of a spiritual awakening, like what I like to call a mini awakening. For example, when I was about 13 or 14, I had one of my first, that I can recall, spiritual awakenings or spiritual shifts, where I really let go of a lot of what felt really restrictive to me. So at the time I felt, as a middle schooler, right? I felt very depressed, and I felt very out of place, and I didn't really feel like I fit in. And funny enough, it was New Year's Eve, where I was laying in bed, and I just kind of remember talking myself through things a bit. And I think I told myself, which probably was a spiritual message, you don't have to feel this way, and you can choose to connect more with people and really kind of love yourself and love who you are. And I can't say that was like a complete and total realization across, years and years, and where I felt completely confident all the time. But I definitely had this major shift in my attitude, and I went from being very depressed and feeling very isolated to really connecting with my peers and kind of like being the cool girl, all of a sudden, right? So I went from being like the outcast to the cool girl, overnight. And some of that was through sharing my experiences and sharing my understanding just of stuff I was doing socially and everything like that. So that was one example of a little mini awakening that I had. Another one that I can very distinctly remember was when I was about 16, and I had recently got my driver's license. I was working, I had a job over the summer, and I was a very precocious young teen, and I felt like I knew everything, right? Like maybe those of you who are a young lady or have had a daughter in your life can relate to the teen who knew it all. And I was driving around during a lunch break one summer, and I realized maybe I don't know as much as I think I do, and maybe I should listen to people and hear what they have to say. So even that was just this mini little shift, and it helped me to be more patient with other people and to really listen. And it really calmed my attitude down a little bit. Not that I was like a walking nightmare or anything, but I definitely had a little bit of an attitude sometimes, and that really helped me with just kind of calming down and it being more, thoughtful and patient. Another time, and I think this is a really important one, but another time where I experienced a little shift, a little mini awakening, was I read an article, this was in my early 30s, about how when we have preconceived notions of something, where if we hold a belief, our brain will automatically reject information that contradicts that belief. So recognizing that, it was actually a pathway or a gateway to mindfulness, where I could pay attention to my thoughts more closely and understand that oh, here I am bouncing that out, and I need to receive that information and process it rather than just automatically reject it. I may still land in the same belief that I had or was holding, but it's just this automatic rejection that causes us to stay really stuck in our beliefs and kind of become attached to them, right? And that kind of leads me to what the goal is of spiritual awakening, what's really happening. And I say the word goal loosely because, it's a lot more than that, but and it's not so much that spirit sets a goal for you, but it's what is spiritual awakening meant to be? And it's meant to be a form of liberation. And what that means is you're shifting into a higher vibrational frequency or a higher awareness or level of consciousness, where you're able to detach a little bit from your previous identity, a more dense identity. And particularly, it tends to be your more human identity in this present lifetime. So you might, when you're approaching awakening, or even a little after, you might go, I'm a mom, I'm a doctor, I'm a cashier, I live in this town, and this is my identity. And when we awaken, we start to see ourselves as much bigger than that. And that's when we start to see ourselves as a spiritual being having a human experience. And for some of us, that even inspires the exploration of starseed identity. And that we're taking that lens of our human life, and we're looking at it bigger. We start to be curious about past lives. We start to be curious about lives that we may have experienced off planet as starseeds. Some people don't have a starseed origin, so they might be more exploring some of those earthly past lives because they're more earth seeds. And that's part of that shift that we experience, is detaching from identity. And then what ends up happening, though, is a lot of times, because we're still growing, we're kind of little infant newborns when we first wake up, we are looking for our new identity and kind of run into another little trap. Because once again, spiritual awakening, the entire journey is about liberation. It's about detaching from these notions and these identities and knowing yourself as a multi-dimensional, multifaceted being, that interconnectedness, the oneness with all. And there's a lot of people who believe that once you wake up, you'll just innately, I know I'm part of the one. I know I'm part of oneness. I know I'm part of everything. But I found that actually takes a lot of mastery to really understand and embody that. So it's definitely a process that people move through that I've observed. And not everybody will experience this. Not everybody will explore past lives directly and attach to those identities. And a lot of folks who have a really great innate remembrance will enjoy the remembering of these past lives, but will not 100% attach to that identity. So if you notice yourself doing that, if you've really gotten excited, right? Because it is exciting to find out, through a meditation or a QHHT session or something like that, find out more about your past life identity. It's really exciting to integrate that into your current life and make that a part of you. But the truth is, it's been a part of you all along, and it's not 100% part of your current identity. It's a vibration or a strength that your soul draws upon as part of your lineage, as part of your integration. And for most of us alive in this timeline, in this time and space, that's a lot of what we're doing with our spiritual awakening, is integration. We're bringing in our spiritual knowing and living it through embodiment. So let me talk for a moment also about another trap of spiritual awakening, particularly the type of awakening where you're experiencing changes in your physical life and your current life situation, and you're just having that lightening of understanding. Like, it's like where the wound is, the light enters, as Rumi says. So when a lot of people, and a lot of people get really stuck here, so bear with me. A lot of people awaken spiritually and they start to see the dark side of everything. They start to see and believe and understand the conspiracy behind everything. And they'll go down rabbit holes trying to figure everything out, who are the reptilians, who are the controllers, all of that stuff. And there is truth in a lot of that understanding, a lot of that knowledge. But once again, when you're attached to it and you're attached to it as your reality and the reality that you and everyone else is living from your perspective, it's a trap. It's a spiritual trap. And it's not one that other people really laid for you. It's your own trap, which is, once again, what spiritual awakening is all about. It's seeing the cage that we put ourselves in, the prison that we put ourselves in through our thoughts and our notions and our beliefs, and slowly taking them down so that we have more expanded awareness and more consciousness. And as we do that, as we let go of these notions and break them down, spirit brings in more understanding. And that's kind of the life cycle of awakening, or the spiritual growth path. It's collapse and expansion, collapse and expansion. So, and it's like those tower moments, right? Where like you had everything in its right place, and then things start crumbling, things start falling down. And that's when you can, it's painful when it happens. But once you allow it to happen and you surrender to that experience, that's when the new understanding moves in. So that's really cool. So some of us have experienced a kundalini awakening, which is pretty different in a way from spiritual awakening, just that simple shift where you just have that moment of, something breaks free. In kundalini awakening, you experience a lot of energetic changes. And it's kind of an initiation or rite of passage for the mystic. Because what happens is you have a lot of your spiritual gifts that start to come online, like your clairvoyance, your clairsentience. I've heard recently people talking about it as being the voice in their head, which is true, but I love the playfulness of it, but it's like, guys, that's your intuition. like that's you and your higher self speaking to you. Like, we don't have to make it sound like we're on the train to Crazy Town. I mean, that's kind of what I would like to see us happen, is like normalizing that voice, your inner voice, is your true voice, and that is a natural thing, not crazy, right? So at this point, I'm not too worried about being crazy, but I do think it's something that we should be like considerate to ourselves about and socially aware of, just so that as we're helping other people on the path, which, isn't something we have to do, we are conscious of our language, so that we don't make it scary for other people and make them feel like that this is still an odd woo-woo thing, and that it's not normal, because really it's very normal. It's very normal to use your inner guidance, and people do it all the time, and they just think of it in a different way, or they don't recognize it as being spirit talking to them. So kundalini awakening usually involves a bundle of energy down at the base in your root chakra that unleashes and goes up your spine and out the top of your head. And it also involves these surges of energy that are kind of electric, or like they can feel like an orgasm even in your whole body. For some people, it can be very painful. And to that, I recommend highly grounding your energy. And I'm actually hearing salt water baths, especially like, Epsom salt, magnesium, doing some salt water baths to help you ground and disperse that energy if you have access to a bath. Definitely. Water is so cleansing. I love showers. If you don't have a bathtub, shower is the next best thing. And that will help you disperse that energy if you're going through a kundalini awakening or you're having residual kundalini rising energy that's driving you a little bit bonkers. So for myself, I experienced this in a very interesting way. And I think a lot of people who've had kundalini awakenings can relate to this. What precedes a kundalini awakening is known as the dark night of the soul. So people who have a spiritual awakening experience something like this, but it's a little bit different. A lot of times in a spiritual awakening, like I said, their physical circumstances, their life circumstances crumble. So like they lose a job, they lose a marriage, they lose a home, something like that occurs. So there's that tower moment where things crumble. When you have a kundalini awakening, a lot of times you lose yourself. You have a really hard time feeling like you fit in. You can actually start to feel like you don't fit within your body. Your body can become very uncomfortable. You may experience like a lot of depressive symptoms. You may feel like you haven't been seen or heard. You may feel like you're not living in your purpose. And it can be very uncomfortable. And for me, what actually started to happen, and this was pretty wild as far as I'm concerned, like I'm generally, even pre and post awakening, I'm a very grounded person, very rational, very logical. And for me, my thoughts started repeating. So I actually engaged in a ritual of sorts that I call the destiny codes, where I was experiencing these feelings. I was experiencing this feeling of not being seen, not being in my purpose, and having depression. And I had kind of like a come to Jesus moment, and I was recommended this book about manifestation, and she talks about how to initiate change in your life. So like I did the little ritual and I basically surrendered. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Spirit, take the wheel. Universe, take the wheel. I don't know what the hell's going on, and I just can't. I obviously don't know what I'm doing, so somebody else do it. And from that moment, everything changed. So I had some positive changes, but emotionally, I wasn't ready to embrace them. So I actually got offered like my dream job, and I had some other positive things like that happen. But I was still like terrified, even though I was starting to be recognized, starting to be seen, right? So I kind of kept delving into this dark night of the soul depression, didn't know what it was at the time, and my thoughts started repeating. And I actually needed to watch this one movie on repeat like a bunch of times. It was really like obsessive. It was kind of crazy. So I had this week where just like the same cycle of thoughts just went over and over and over again. And I started to feel really uncomfortable in my body. I started crying all the time. And I fortunately was seeing a therapist already at the time. And she encouraged me to start meditating. I kind of like couldn't do it because that's how uncomfortable I was. I just started crying like immediately. And I went home and suicidal thoughts crept in. Just some thoughts that I don't want to be here. I should kill myself, that kind of thing. And I had the awareness in that moment to know that that wasn't the right answer for me. I had a husband, I have 2 beautiful kids, and I was like, no way, not leaving them. Nope, we're not doing that. So I had that level of awareness and separation between my thoughts and my observation of the thoughts to go like, no, nope, we're not doing that. But still had a lot of pain. So I reached out to a friend of mine, and they recommended I start meditating, and they recommended Eckhart Tolle. And I immediately downloaded one of his audiobooks, listened to it while I was resting that night and as I was going to sleep. And he describes spiritual awakening in his book. And the next morning, and he talks about the pain body. That's a really important point. He talks about the pain body. So like all of that pain that I was experiencing under his theory, that's the pain body. And I see it in this interesting, it almost like, it's like a register or a spectrum, but it goes on like a half circle for me. So it can be your pain body or your ego can be kind of deriving its energy and its power off of like really happy thoughts, and it can derive its energy and its power off of really negative thoughts. So I was experiencing this pain body, really high pain in my body, in my awareness, in my being. And I woke up in the morning and it was gone. It was just gone. I had just released it. And I felt incredible. I felt at peace. I was so much more aware of my thoughts. I was so much more aware of what I was doing. And I was able to make more conscious choices. So like where prior to awakening, I'd be like, oh, I have free time. I'll take a nap. And post awakening, I'd be like, oh, I have free time. I could do something right now that really lights me up. I'll go swimming. So like I would, instead of taking a nap or scrolling on my phone or doing something that, not that those things are valuable in their own right, but I wasn't thinking big enough about what I could be doing with myself. So that opened me up to thinking bigger and being more spontaneous and doing things that were better for myself than just being complacent with what I normally did. And then what followed that peaceful feeling, which did last for like several months, was the rising of this incredible energy that for me, I mostly experienced around my solar plexus. I experienced this huge glowing ball, and I noticed it the most. It was very powerful when I felt other people's pain. So I had a couple of occasions to be in a group setting where people were speaking about their hardships and stuff, and like this ball would just grow and grow and grow, and that was in my stomach. And I didn't really know what to do with it. Like I felt like I could release it, but I was like, it was a little scary. So I kind of like kept it there, and my awareness of it would come and go. And then a few days later, I had a ton of my own anxiety. I was starting one of those new jobs, and I was excited but very nervous to meet new people. And that energy ball started expanding and growing in my stomach, and it started on its own to go up, and it wanted to come out my throat. So I allowed it, but it also freaked me the heck out. And I was having that full body orgasm feeling, which was pretty incredible. So that was like just an amazing experience. And then what followed was I was feeling like I had an antenna sticking out of my head. So I felt like I had this, pillar of energy, or this, like rod of energy sticking up out of my head, but it was completely invisible. And it felt like it went about 3 feet up. And that was about all of it that I could feel. And that lingered for about a week or two until that kind of dissipated as well. But what that is like your energy connecting with your upper chakras. So that's a whole other thing that we can get into about the upper chakras, because you have a ton of chakras in your body, not just the base 7, and you have some outside of your body too, which is really cool. And they move around and they do cool stuff. So we will talk about that another time. But that is a lot of what Kundalini awakening. Some people will experience, like I said, like electric feeling in their body, shocks and stuff like that. And like I said, like a really important thing to do when you're experiencing that, if you can, is ground your energy, take a bath, take a shower, and play with it. Like part of the reason why you may be experiencing it in that way is because you're not using it and you're not having fun with it. So play with it, shoot it out your fingers, or, like I said, cough it up or something, like play with it, see what works for you, and see how that goes. And if you happen to try something and you want to share it in our group and you're a member, go ahead and throw it in the chat or something so that we can all marvel at your experience and your knowledge and what you've learned and what you're playing with. So in summary, there's 2 basic types of awakening. You have the spiritual awakening, and then you have the Kundalini awakening. both of them are about liberation from limiting beliefs and notions and identities that you hold that are restricting you and restricting your energy and restricting your understanding. And so pay attention to what you still hold on to after you've had your awakening. Like, what parts of your identity are you still identifying with? And a good exercise, although use this with caution because it's very powerful, and I can see how it could easily lend itself to kind of breaking down your sense of self in a very quick fashion. So just use this with caution. Don't over-identify with your answers to it. But the question is, who am I if I'm not? Who am I if I'm not a wife? Who am I if I'm not in love with this person? Who am I if I'm not an accountant? Who am I if I'm not a mom or a dad or an uncle? Like whatever these things are that these parts of your identity that you're attached to, when you ask yourself that question, like, your identity is not that function. Your identity is you as a whole being, whether those aspects of your life are present or not. So that's what tends to happen, right? Is we get identified and we are attached to the identity of being this to this person, or being in love, or being this or being that, or being this occupation. And that's not truly who we are. We are everything without having to be any one little thing, right? Like, that's such a limited idea of who you are. And also, like, all of these things are temporary. Your job is temporary. Your relationships are temporary. Everything in your life, everything in the cosmos, everything in the universe is temporary. Nothing is forever. And so when we're identifying and attached to that identity with something temporary, that's where we have a lot of pain and collapse when we lose that thing. So I'm not saying that you're going to lose your job, or you're going to lose your spouse, or you're going to lose your, someone else that you care about, or something else that you care about. But sometimes that does happen. And so when we can see ourselves as something bigger than that, and as more than just that relationship, that job, that possession, we can expand more quickly. And also it helps us with our grief. Grief is always hard whenever you lose something, and having a little bit of that sense of that was not all that you were, and that was not your entire experience, does help you with the grieving process, which is something I know a lot of people are really uncomfortable with and have a really hard time with. And it's something I'd love to talk about in a future episode. So stay, and I will see you on the other side.